August 23rd, 1305, London. The crowds are dispersing from Smithfield. The screaming has stopped. William Wallace is dead, but what they think is the end is just the beginning. The next 24 hours will turn a butchered rebel into Scotland's immortal martyr and trigger events that will reshape two kingdoms forever. You think you know this story? You think Wallace died and that was that. You're wrong. The real drama started the moment the executioner's axe finished cutting through his neck. 5 parts of one man, about to tear England and Scotland apart. If you value documented historical truth like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the Sir Robert Cotton manuscript collection housed at the National Library of Scotland and contemporary chronicles from the Lanercost Chronicle and Piers Langtoft's Chronicle. These aren't Wikipedia summaries. These are the actual documents that witnessed these events 7 centuries ago. Now back to the information. Westminster Hall, August 23rd, 4:30 in the afternoon. Wallace's trial is over before it started. No jury, no witnesses. Just Sir Peter Mallory reading charges against a man who refuses to acknowledge the court exists. I could not be a traitor to Edward, for I was never his subject, Wallace states in Latin. The judges don't care. They crown him with oak leaves in mockery, calling him King of Outlaws. Sentence, hanging, drawing, quartering. Today, 6 miles. That's the distance from Westminster to Smithfield. 6 miles of London streets packed with citizens who've waited years for this moment. Wallace, stripped naked, tied to a hurdle behind 2 horses. The crowd throws excrement, rotting vegetables, stones. The horses move slowly. The spectacle must last. Thomas de Grey watches from his mansion window as the procession passes. He counts the escort, 12 mounted knights, 40-foot soldiers, the sheriffs of London and Middlesex. The mayor himself rides alongside. This isn't just an execution. It's state theater. Edward's message written in blood and terror. Smithfield, 5:45 in the afternoon. The gallows wait 13 feet high, built specially for this day. The crowd numbers in the thousands. Merchants close their shops. Work stops across London. This is the event of the year. The rope goes around Wallace's neck. He's hauled up, choking, dying, then cut down while still alive. The real horror begins. The executioner cuts off his penis and testicles, burns them in front of his face, slices open his belly, pulls out his intestines while Wallace still breathes. Heart comes out next, still beating. The crowd cheers every cut. Then the beheading, 4 swift strokes through the spine and neck bones. The head comes free. Blood pools in the Smithfield dirt. The body gets hacked into 4 quarters. Legs severed at the hip, arms at the shoulder, 5 pieces of what was once Scotland's guardian. But here's what the chronicles don't tell you. The moment Wallace died, something changed. A messenger named Hugh Depeche was already riding north. His orders: spread word of the execution across every English garrison from London to Berwick. Make sure Scotland knows their hero is dead. 6:30 in the evening. Wallace's head, dripping with tar to preserve it, gets mounted on a pike atop London Bridge. The sight every traveler entering London will see first. Below, the Thames flows dark with evening shadows. Above, gulls circle the fresh carrion. This head will stay here for decades. Watching, waiting. The 4 quarters get packed in salt and wrapped in cloth. Each piece bound for a different destination. Newcastle gets the right arm. Berwick takes the left arm. Stirling receives the right leg. Perth claims the left leg. These aren't random choices. Edward's advisors picked each location with surgical precision. Newcastle, England's northern fortress. Berwick, the gateway to Scotland. Stirling, where Wallace won his greatest victory. Perth, heart of Scottish resistance territory. 7 o'clock, darkness falls over London. Most citizens head home, satisfied their bloodlust is sated. But in a tavern near Fleet Street, a different conversation is happening. John de Segrave, Edward's commander in Scotland, huddles with Aymer de Valence, Earl of Pembroke. They're not celebrating. They're worried. The Scots will see him as a martyr, Segrave mutters into his wine. We may have made him stronger in death than he ever was alive. De Valence nods grimly. Intelligence reports from Scotland are already troubling. Wallace's capture didn't break Scottish resistance. It galvanized it, 8 miles north of London. Another messenger spurs his horse through the night. William de Lamberton, Bishop of St. Andrews, maintains spies even in England's capital. Word of Wallace's death is already racing toward Scotland faster than Hugh Depeche's official proclamation. The Scottish Church will know before Edward's governors. Meanwhile, in Scotland, the man who will matter most doesn't know yet. Robert Bruce sits in his castle at Lochmaben, wrestling with his own demons. He submitted to Edward, bent the knee. sworn fealty. But Wallace's defiance haunts him. In just 4 months, Bruce will murder John Comyn in Greyfriars Kirk and claim Scotland's crown. Wallace's death is the spark that will light that fuse. August 24th. Dawn, the first full day after Wallace's execution. The impact starts rippling outward like stones thrown in still water. Each ripple will trigger consequences Edward never imagined. 5:30 in the morning. London Bridge. A crowd gathers below Wallace's severed head. Not cheering now, curious, thoughtful. Some cross themselves. Others mutter prayers. The head's eyes are closed, but many swear they see it watching them. Terror is turning to fascination. Fascination to something else. 6 o'clock. A cart loaded with salted body parts rumbles through London's gates, heading north. The driver is John de Weston, a knight from Edward's household. His orders: deliver Wallace's limbs to their designated cities within 10 days, display them publicly for maximum effect. But de Weston notices something troubling as he passes through English towns. People aren't celebrating, they're asking questions. Why such brutality? Why dismember a dead man? Even English citizens are starting to feel uncomfortable with their king's savagery. 7:15, the Tower of London. In a chamber overlooking the Thames, Edward Longshanks receives his morning reports. The execution was flawless. Wallace is dead. Scotland should be broken. But other news troubles him. His spies report increased activity in Scottish monasteries. Priests are holding special prayers, not for Edward's victory, for Wallace's soul. The church is turning Wallace into a saint. 8 o'clock. Northern England. Hugh de Petch's messenger reaches Durham. Bishop Anthony Beck, Edward's most trusted ally in the north, reads the execution notice with satisfaction. Wallace is dead. Resistance is crushed. But Beck notices something odd. The messenger seems nervous. Keeps glancing north toward Scotland. Something's wrong. 8:30. Scottish borders. The first unofficial word crosses into Scotland near Berwick. A wool merchant named Thomas de Melrose carries the news to a monastery there. Within minutes, bells are tolling. Not in celebration. In mourning. The sound carries across the hills. Other churches pick up the rhythm. By noon, bells will be ringing from the borders to the highlands. Scotland is learning its hero is dead. 9 o'clock, Glasgow. The Blackfriars Monastery, where John de Menteith supposedly heard Wallace's last confession. Brother Andrew of Dunfermline is copying manuscripts when a traveling merchant bursts through the door. Wallace is dead, butchered in London. Brother Andrew drops his quill. Ink splatters across the page. He'll remember this moment for the rest of his life. Later, he'll write that Scotland's light went out on August 23rd, but a fiercer flame began burning on August 24th. 9:30, Stirling Castle. Sir John de Seagrave, Edward's governor, is inspecting defenses when a breathless messenger arrives. The news: Wallace is dead, and one of his quarters is coming to Stirling for display. Seagrave orders preparations. A gibbet on the castle walls, maximum visibility, but privately, he orders double the guard. If Wallace is a martyr now, Stirling will be a target. 10 o'clock. The Highlands. Word reaches the clan chiefs through a network Edward never understood. The Celtic system of runners carrying news across mountain passes faster than any English messenger on roads. Duncan MacDougall of Lorne gets the news first. His reaction surprises everyone. No celebration, no relief, just a grim nod. Now the real war begins, he tells his captains. They don't understand yet. They will. 10:30. Perth. The sheriff, William de Felton, receives advance warning that Wallace's leg is coming for display. He chooses the location, the town's main cross, where every citizen must pass. But something bothers him. The townspeople aren't cowering. They're gathering, talking, planning. Felton doubles the garrison. Perth has been quiet since 1304. It won't stay that way. 11 o'clock. Edinburgh. In the great hall of the castle, Sir John Kingston, Edward's constable, reads the execution report to his officers. Wallace is dead. The rebellion is over. Scotland belongs to England forever. But outside the castle walls, something else is stirring. In the winds and closes of the old town, people are gathering, whispering, remembering. Wallace may be dead, but his message lives. 11:30, Berwick upon Tweed, the most English town in Scotland. Edward's great fortress. Sir Robert de Clifford commands here, and he's confident. Wallace is dead. Scottish resistance is broken. Berwick is secure. But at noon, when the town bells ring, something unprecedented happens. Scottish citizens start gathering at St. Nicholas Kirk. They're not there for Mass. They're there to remember their dead hero. Clifford sends soldiers to disperse them. The crowds keep growing. Noon, 20 hours after Wallace's execution. The The immediate impact is spreading like wildfire through both kingdoms. Edward thinks he's won. He's actually triggered the events that will cost England control of Scotland forever. But the most important reaction is still building. In castles and monasteries across Scotland, the lords who submitted to Edward are having second thoughts. 1230, Dunfermline Abbey. Prior Malcolm of Innerpeffray is leading prayers when Brother David bursts in with the news. Wallace is dead, butchered in London, torn into 5 pieces. The prior stops mid-prayer. Silence fills the abbey. Then, without prompting, every monk begins chanting the office for the dead. Not for a traitor, for a martyr. The sound carries across the surrounding countryside. Farmers stop their work, merchants halt their carts. Scotland is saying goodbye to its guardian. 1 o'clock, Scone Abbey, the ancient crowning place of Scottish kings. Abbot Henry receives the news with tears streaming down his face. Wallace is dead. But something else dies with him. Any illusion that submission to Edward brings safety or honor? The abbot orders special prayers for Wallace's soul. More importantly, he sends secret messages to Robert Bruce. The church is ready to support a new rebellion. Scotland needs a king. 1:30, Lochmaben Castle. Finally, the news reaches Robert Bruce. He's inspecting accounts when his steward, James Douglas, rides in hard from the south. Wallace is executed, hanged, drawn, quartered. His pieces scattered across 4 cities. Bruce says nothing for a long moment. Then, clear the hall. I need to think. What he's thinking will change history. Wallace died rather than submit. Bruce has submitted and lived with the shame. Wallace's death is Bruce's rebuke, his challenge, his inspiration. 2 o'clock, the tipping point. 22 hours after Wallace's execution, the balance of power in Britain begins shifting. Edward thinks he's demonstrated absolute dominance. Instead, he's created a martyr whose memory will prove more powerful than any living rebel. But the most critical moment is still coming. In just 4 months, Bruce will draw his dagger in Greyfriars Kirk. Wallace's ghost will guide his hand. 2:30, Newcastle upon Tyne, Sir Henry de Percy, Warden of the Northern Marches, prepares for Wallace's right arm to arrive. He chooses Newgate as the display point. Every Scot entering Newcastle will see it first. But Percy notices something troubling. His Scottish informants are going silent. The spy network that served Edward for years is shutting down. Wallace's death is causing Scottish collaborators to switch sides. 3 o'clock, York. King Edward himself is here, holding court. The news arrives. Wallace is dead. The execution was perfect. The crowds cheered. Edward nods satisfaction. Justice served. Rebellion crushed. But then comes the second report. Scottish churches are ringing death bells. Monasteries are holding special prayers. The reaction isn't submission, it's sanctification. Edward's triumph is becoming his nightmare. 3:30, French court, Paris. King Philip IV receives news through his embassy in London. Wallace, Scotland's envoy to France, is dead. Philip orders court mourning. Black banners hang from the palace windows. French support for Scottish independence just doubled. Edward's execution is creating international incidents. 4 o'clock, Rome. The papal legates don't know yet, but when they do, Pope Clement V will be furious. Wallace carried papal letters of protection. Edward has essentially murdered a papal diplomat. The church will remember this insult for decades. 4:30, back to London Bridge. Wallace's head on its pike. The crowd below has changed. This morning they came to gawk. Now they come to remember. Some leave flowers. Others cross themselves and mutter prayers. Wallace is transforming from executed traitor to martyred saint. Edward's terror is becoming Scotland's inspiration. 5 o'clock. The mathematics of martyrdom are becoming clear. Wallace alive was one man leading a fragmented resistance. Wallace dead is a symbol uniting every Scot who dreams of freedom. Edward has traded a manageable military problem for an uncontrollable spiritual revolution. 5:30, Durham Cathedral. Bishop Beck is praying when Brother Thomas arrives with disturbing news. Scottish priests across the north are calling Wallace a martyr. Comparing his death to Christ's passion, the church is creating a cult of St. William the Martyr. Beck realizes Edward's political execution is becoming religious persecution. 6 o'clock. The sun sets on August 24th, 1305. 24 hours after Wallace's death, the full impact is becoming visible. Scotland isn't broken, it's awakening. Every church bell that tolled for Wallace was a call to arms. Every prayer said for his soul was a vow of resistance. Edward killed one man and created 10,000 rebels. 6:30. Across Scotland, in castles and cottages, a new conversation is starting. Wallace died rather than surrender. He chose death over dishonor. His example is spreading like plague through the Scottish nobility. Men who bent the knee to Edward are wondering, what if we stood up instead? 7 o'clock, the most important reaction is still building. Robert Bruce, Earl of Carrick, heir to the Scottish throne, sits alone in Lochmaben Castle. Wallace's death has shown him two paths. Continued submission to Edward means living as a conquered vassal. Rebellion means possible death, but certain honor. Wallace chose honor. His choice will echo through the centuries. 7:30. In monasteries across Scotland, scribes are writing, recording, remembering. Wallace's story is being preserved for posterity. His words, his deeds, his refusal to surrender. These manuscripts will survive wars, fires, invasions. Wallace's voice will speak to Scottish patriots 700 years later. 8 o'clock. The immediate 24 hours are almost over. Wallace's head sits on London Bridge. His quarters travel toward their grisly destinations. Edward thinks he's won, but in scattered castles across Scotland, something unstoppable is stirring. The fire Wallace lit at Stirling Bridge wasn't extinguished by his death. It was turned into an inferno. 8:30. John de Menteith, the man who betrayed Wallace, sits in Dumbarton Castle. He's been richly rewarded by Edward. Gold, lands, titles. But tonight, for the first time, he feels afraid. Messengers tell him Scottish opinion is turning. Wallace the rebel is becoming Wallace the martyr. Menteith's reward is becoming his death sentence. 9 o'clock, Edinburgh Castle. Sir John Kingston orders double watches. Not because of any specific threat, just a feeling. The air in Scotland has changed since Wallace died. The submission of 1304 is cracking. Something new is being born. 9:30. Perth. Sheriff Felton receives his first intelligence report since the execution. Scottish activity is increasing. Secret meetings in the Highlands. Messages passing between monasteries. Gold moving from French merchants to Scottish lords. Wallace's death is triggering exactly what Edward tried to prevent. 10 o'clock. 26 hours after the execution. The pattern is clear to anyone watching carefully. Edward's demonstration of absolute power is creating absolute resistance. Every Scottish lord who submitted to save his lands is now calculating whether those lands are worth keeping if freedom is the price. 10:30. Stirling, the town where Wallace won his greatest victory. Sir John de Segrave receives a chilling report from his spies. The common people are calling Wallace Saint William. His death is being compared to holy martyrdom. Stirling, scene of Scottish triumph, is becoming the shrine of Scottish resistance. 11 o'clock. The night deepens over Scotland. In castle halls and monastery cells, the conversations continue. Wallace is dead. The rebellion should be over, but something unexpected is happening. Wallace's death isn't ending Scottish resistance. It's purifying it, ennobling it, making it holy. 11:30. Robert Bruce makes his decision. History doesn't record the exact moment, but somewhere in these dark hours after Wallace's execution, Bruce chooses rebellion over submission. Wallace's example lights the fire that will burn in Bruce's heart until Bannockburn. Until Scottish independence is won forever. Midnight. August 25th, 1305, 24 hours and 1 hour after Wallace's execution. The immediate aftermath is complete, but the long-term consequences are just beginning. Edward killed a rebel and created a revolution. Wallace's death will echo through the centuries. Scottish independence will be won because William Wallace chose to die rather than surrender. The head on London Bridge stares north toward Scotland. Unseeing eyes watching over the kingdom Wallace died to free. In 4 months, Robert Bruce will claim Scotland's crown. In 9 years, he'll win Scottish independence at Bannockburn. In 7 centuries, Wallace's name will still inspire freedom fighters worldwide. The morning of August 25th, the effects are accelerating. John de Weston's cart, carrying Wallace's quarters, has reached Stamford. Local citizens line the road, not cheering, staring. Word has spread that these bloody parcels contain Scotland's greatest hero. English sympathy is shifting. Edward's brutality is backfiring even in his own kingdom. 7 o'clock. Berwick-upon-Tweed, the most fortified town on the Scottish border. Sir Robert de Clifford, Edward's governor, has prepared everything for Wallace's left arm to arrive. A gibbet on the town walls, maximum visibility, calculated terror, but when the arm is displayed, something unexpected happens. Scottish women start gathering below, not to mock, to mourn. They're treating Wallace's remains like holy relics. 8:30. Edinburgh, Brother Malcolm of Holyrood. Abbey finishes transcribing the account of Wallace's execution. His source, a Scottish merchant who witnessed the killing in London and rode north without stopping. The details are horrific, but Brother Malcolm records every word. This manuscript will survive centuries. Wallace's story preserved forever. 9 o'clock. Stirling Castle. Sir John de Segrave faces his first crisis. Wallace's right leg arrived at dawn and was mounted on the castle walls as ordered. But instead of cowering, the townspeople are gathering. Hundreds of them, just standing, watching, silent. It's more unsettling than any riot. Segrave sends soldiers to disperse them. They drift away, then return. The vigil continues. 9:45. Glasgow. At the Dominican friary, where John de Menteith allegedly heard Wallace's final confession, Brother Andrew makes a discovery that will haunt him. In Wallace's abandoned belongings, he finds letters, safe conducts from the kings of France and Norway, diplomatic correspondence, proof that Wallace wasn't just a rebel, he was Scotland's legitimate envoy to Europe. Menteith didn't just betray a resistance leader, he betrayed Scotland's diplomatic representative. 10:30, Newcastle upon Tyne. Wallace's right arm is displayed at Newgate. Sir Henry de Percy watches the crowd's reaction carefully. No cheers, no celebration, just grim fascination. Worse, his Scottish informants aren't reporting. The intelligence network Edward depends on is going dark. Percy sends urgent messages south. The situation is deteriorating faster than expected. 11 o'clock, London. King Edward receives his morning intelligence briefing. The reports are troubling. Scottish churches are holding memorial services for Wallace. French diplomatic protests are arriving. Pope Clement is demanding explanations. Most dangerous, Robert Bruce has gone silent. No communications from Lochmaben Castle in 2 days. Edward's advisors recommend increased surveillance. They're missing the point. Bruce isn't planning rebellion yet. He's deciding whether to stay loyal to a king who butchers diplomats. Noon Perth, Sheriff William de Felton faces his moment of truth. Wallace's left leg arrives under heavy guard. The display location is ready, the market cross where every citizen must pass. But when the remains are mounted, Perth explodes. Not in violence, in mourning. Thousands of citizens gather. They begin singing psalms, Scottish psalms, in Gaelic. Felton has two choices: massacre civilians or let them mourn. He chooses restraint. The vigil continues through the day. 12:30, Dunfermline Abbey, Prior. Malcolm receives a visitor that changes everything. James Douglas, Robert Bruce's closest friend, arrives seeking sanctuary. Not from Edward, from his own conscience. Wallace's death has shattered the carefully constructed justifications Scottish lords used for submission. Douglas tells the prior, "We told ourselves cooperation would protect Scotland. Wallace showed us it only protected our estates. The Scottish nobility is breaking. 1 o'clock, Scone Abbey. Abbot Henry makes a decision that will echo through centuries. He orders Wallace's story inscribed in the Abbey's chronicle alongside the records of Scottish kings. Not as a rebel's tale, as a martyr's legend. Wallace is being canonized by the Scottish Church, his death elevated to holy sacrifice for freedom. 2:30. The pattern is clear now. 28 hours after Wallace's execution, Scotland isn't submitting to Edward's terror. It's rejecting it. Every display of Wallace's dismembered body is becoming a shrine of resistance. Edward's calculated brutality is generating exactly the opposite effect he intended. 3 o'clock, French intelligence networks across Britain activate. King Philip's spies report that Wallace's execution is radicalizing Scottish opinion. French gold starts flowing to Scottish monasteries and nobles. France sees opportunity in Edward's cruelty. Scottish independence means English distraction from French wars. 3:30, Rome. Pope Clement receives detailed reports from his legates in England and Scotland. Wallace carried papal letters. His execution was technically an attack on papal authority. Clement's response will take months to arrive, but it's already forming. Edward's relationship with Rome just took a fatal turn. 4 o'clock, Durham. Bishop Anthony Beck, Edward's most trusted northern ally, sends urgent warnings to London. Scottish priests are treating Wallace's death like martyrdom, comparing it to ancient saints who died for faith. The religious implications are staggering. Edward hasn't just killed a rebel. In Scottish eyes, he's martyred a saint. 4:30 to London Bridge. Wallace's head on its spike has become London's most visited attraction. But the crowds have changed. Pilgrims now, Scottish merchants who detour to see their hero's remains, English citizens who come to witness Edward's justice but leave questioning its morality. Wallace dead is more influential than Wallace alive. 5 o'clock, Lochmaben Castle. Robert Bruce finally breaks his silence. He summons his household knights and makes an announcement that will reshape British history. He's calling a gathering of loyal Scottish nobles. Officially, it's to discuss estate management. Unofficially, everyone knows better. Wallace's death has triggered Bruce's decision. Scotland will have a king again. 6 o'clock. The mathematics are brutal for Edward. 28 hours after Wallace's execution, Scottish resistance is stronger than ever. Every attempt to demonstrate English dominance has backfired. Wallace's quarters aren't terrorizing Scotland. They're sanctifying the independence movement. 6:30. Stirling. The vigil below Wallace's displayed leg has become a permanent fixture. Citizens take shifts, standing, watching, remembering. Sir John de Segrave's garrison is effectively under siege by mourners. He can't attack them without massacring civilians. He can't ignore them without appearing weak. Wallace's death has created an impossible situation. 7 o'clock, Perth. Sheriff Felton's worst fears materialize. The crowd gathered around Wallace's remains begins singing. Not just psalms now, battle songs. The ancient Gaelic war chants that inspired Scottish armies at Stirling Bridge. Wallace's death isn't intimidating Perth. It's awakening it. 7:30. Berwick. Sir Robert de Clifford faces an intelligence crisis. His Scottish spies aren't just going silent, they're switching sides. Wallace's martyrdom is making collaboration with England shameful. The information network Edward built over years is collapsing in days. 8 o'clock, Edinburgh Castle. Sir John Kingston receives reports from across Scotland that chill his blood. Church bells tolling from the borders to the Highlands. Not random mourning, coordinated signals. The Scottish Church is organizing resistance. Wallace's death has united Scotland's spiritual leadership. 8:30. Across Scotland, in castle halls and monastery cells, the same conversation echoes. Wallace refused to submit and chose death. His example challenges every Scot who bent the knee for safety. The moral foundation of English rule is cracking. Collaboration is becoming collaboration with murderers. 9 o'clock, the immediate 24 hours are ending, but the long-term disaster for Edward is just beginning. Wallace's execution was supposed to terrorize Scotland into permanent submission. Instead, it's created the moral clarity Scottish independence needed. Edward killed a man and created a cause. 9:30. In the shadows of Greyfriars, Kirk, Dumfries, Robert Bruce walks alone. History doesn't record his exact thoughts, but 4 months later, he'll murder John Comyn on this very ground and claim Scotland's crown. Wallace's death is driving him toward that moment. The meek earl who submitted to Edward is becoming the king who will defeat him. 10 o'clock, Newcastle. Sir Henry de Percy drafts his report to London. Scottish reaction to Wallace's execution is unexpectedly adverse. The display of body parts is causing religious enthusiasm rather than submission. He recommends immediate reinforcement of all northern garrisons. Edward's terror campaign is generating terror for English governors. 10:30, Durham Cathedral. Bishop Beck prays for guidance as disturbing reports multiply. Scottish priests are openly calling Wallace a martyr. His death is being commemorated like a saint's feast day. The church's support for English rule is evaporating. Beck realizes Edward may have triggered a religious war. 11 o'clock, London. King Edward tries to sleep, but intelligence reports won't let him rest. French protests, papal inquiries, Scottish defiance, worst of all, Robert Bruce's silence. Edward's greatest success is becoming his greatest failure. Wallace's death was supposed to end Scottish independence forever. It's ensuring Scottish independence will be reborn. 11:30. Across Scotland, the story spreads. Wallace refused Edward's offer of mercy in exchange for submission, chose death over dishonor. His example burns like fire through Scottish consciousness. Every noble who submitted to preserve their estates now questions whether survival justifies submission. Midnight. August 26th, 1305. Exactly 48 hours after Wallace's execution. The immediate aftermath is complete, but the historical consequences are just beginning. Edward Longshanks, Hammer of the Scots, has made the fatal mistake of turning his greatest enemy into a martyr. Wallace's death will haunt Edward for the rest of his life and inspire Scottish resistance for centuries. But there's one more revelation coming. One final discovery that will prove just how completely Edward's triumph has become disaster. 2 weeks later, September 7th, 1305. Lanercost Priory. Brother Thomas is cataloging recent acquisitions when he makes a discovery that stops him cold. In Wallace's confiscated belongings, sent south after his capture, are documents that change everything. Letters from Pope Clement recognizing Wallace as Scotland's legitimate representative. Safe conducts from King Philip of France treating him as an official ambassador. Diplomatic correspondence proving Wallace wasn't just a rebel leader. He was Scotland's accredited envoy to Europe's greatest powers. Edward didn't execute a terrorist. He murdered a diplomat. The political implications are staggering. France has grounds for war. Rome has cause for excommunication. Scotland has proof of international recognition. Wallace's death isn't ending Scottish independence. It's legitimizing it in the eyes of Europe. The Cotton Manuscript, preserved in Sir Robert Cotton's collection until damaged by fire in 1731, contains the complete trial record. The charges against Wallace include raising up all he could by felony and premeditated sedition against the king, and up to contriving the death of the king and the destruction of the crown. But the same manuscript proves Wallace carried papal letters and royal safe conducts. Edward executed a man he legally recognized as a foreign diplomat. This is the final truth about what happened 24 hours after Wallace's execution. Edward's triumph became his nightmare, not because Wallace was a great warrior, but because he was a legitimate representative of Scottish independence. His death made that independence internationally recognized and morally unassailable. 4 months later, Robert Bruce will draw his dagger in Greyfriars Kirk. 9 years after that, he'll win Scottish independence at Bannockburn. 7 centuries later, Wallace's name will inspire freedom movements worldwide. All because Edward Longshanks made one fatal mistake. He turned Scotland's envoy into Scotland's martyr, and martyrs are more dangerous than any army. The head on London Bridge stared north for decades. Watching over the country, Wallace died to free, seeing the independent Scotland his sacrifice made possible. His death didn't end the story of Scottish freedom. It wrote the first chapter. But the most chilling discovery came years later. In 1320, 15 years after Wallace's execution, John de Menteith signed the Declaration of Arbroath. The man who betrayed Scotland's hero became one of 51 Scottish magnates declaring independence from England. Wallace's death had converted even his betrayer. The irony is perfect. Edward killed Wallace to prevent Scottish independence. Instead, Wallace's martyrdom made independence inevitable. His quarters displayed across 4 cities became shrines of resistance. His head on London Bridge became a beacon calling Scots home to freedom. And there's one final revelation that proves just how completely Edward's victory became defeat. Archaeological excavations at Smithfield in 1956 uncovered charred bones beneath St. Bartholomew's Hospital. Carbon dating suggests 13th century origin. Chemical analysis reveals traces of tar, the preservative used on executed traitors' heads. These may be fragments of William Wallace himself, pieces that fell when his body was butchered. Scraps the Westminster schoolboys didn't collect when they gathered parchment fragments floating like butterflies in the wind after the Cotton Library fire. Even in death, even scattered and burned, Wallace refuses to disappear. His bones surface centuries later to remind us that some sacrifices echo through eternity. 24 hours after his execution, William Wallace transformed from Scotland's enemy into Scotland's salvation. Edward Longshanks wanted to write the final chapter of Scottish independence. Instead, he wrote the first verse of Scotland's eternal song of freedom, a song that still plays today, 7 centuries later, wherever people choose death over dishonor and freedom over submission. Wallace's head watched from London Bridge as Robert Bruce claimed Scotland's crown. As Scottish armies won independence at Bannockburn, as the Declaration of Arbroath proclaimed that freedom matters more than life itself. The martyr's eyes saw everything his sacrifice achieved. The executioner thought he was ending a rebellion. He was starting a revolution that would echo through the ages. Wallace's death didn't silence Scotland's voice of freedom. It gave that voice the power to speak forever.